Okay, so welcome to Rainforest Station. We have 12 army ducks here at Rainforest Station, and that's the largest collection in the Southern Hemisphere. There were about 22,000 of these vehicles made altogether, and they're all made by women in a factory in Detroit, in Michigan, in the USA. That's what I made in the USA, not what I made to clarify that when we get to this. So all of our ducks are made between 1942 and 1944. So they're almost 80 years old. So those ladies in Detroit must have done quite a good job to have them still running after all this time. As we go past this duck here, you can see that the ducks have 6 wheels, and they're a 6-wheel drive vehicle. All of the wheels are turning all the time. Even in the water, the wheels still turn around, and that helps when we get a rock or a log under the water. We can then hopefully drive up and over and be on our way. And the top speed of the army ducks on land is about 80 kilometres an hour, and in the water that drops down to about 8 to 10 kilometres per hour. And the ducks have 10 forward gears and 2 reverse gears. They're powered by a 6-cylinder engine. It's a GMC engine with about 4.4 litres capacity, or around 270 cubic inches. So our first stop up here, and number 1 on your information sheets, is have a look at these 2 trees in front of us. They're called the Eodia Valeriana tree. And they're the host plant for the Ulysses butterfly. That's the brilliant black and blue butterfly in the picture there. Has anybody seen one of those blue butterflies since you've been here? If you do see one, just yell and point to it, because they are very spectacular looking. They do move very quickly, so don't be afraid to yell out if you do see one. So these trees are what those blue butterflies lay their eggs on, and the leaves of those trees is the preferred food for the caterpillar. And over there under the green shade cloth is their Aristolochia vine, and it's the host plant for the Cairns birdwing butterfly. That's the other butterflies in the pictures there. It's the female on top and the male down below. That one there is Australia's largest butterfly. They get a wingspan about that big on them. And because they're such a big butterfly, they also have very big caterpillars. And often just before those caterpillars change into a butterfly, they'll climb down the stem of that vine and chew the stem off. And that kills the vine, or that part of the vine. And by doing that, it makes it hard for all the smaller caterpillars to find food. So the bigger ones get a bit of an advantage by doing that. And that's why we keep them protected. We actually grow the leaves for the butterfly sanctuary in Coanda. So back to these Eodia trees, there's a drug that they make from the leaves of those trees called atropine. You might have heard of it. It's used in eye drops, used as a muscle stimulant if you're having an operation or a general anaesthetic. There are quite a few other chemicals in the leaves of those trees that have pharmaceutical uses. And Bayer Chemicals, one of the big drug companies, actually grows them down here for all those chemicals. And some people say it's all those drugs in the leaves that make the butterflies fly so well. Yeah, I'm not sure about that part.
Made up?
Yeah, I might have made that bit up. But the rest of it's true. Yeah, that one's a orchard butterfly, I think. About 1.5 to 2 metres of rain a year to support a rainforest like this, and last year here at Rainforest Station we had over 2.5 metres of rain. So these forests should be okay. Yeah. Most of our rain here normally falls during our wet season, and the typical wet season is the first 3 or 4 months of the year. And during the wet season the soil can get very soft with waterlogged, because rainforest trees tend to have fairly shallow root systems. It doesn't always take much wind to blow the trees over during the wet season. And that's what's happened to a few trees up here on the right. And as we go past these ones here, you can see how shallow the roots are down there. And you can also see where the trees blew down and made a big hole in the rainforest canopy. And after that happens, you get all the fast growing pioneer species of trees and other plants. They'll have a growth spurt chasing up, and that's catching the sunlight, and it will very quickly fill in the gap. So one of those species of trees that grows very quickly is called the black walnut tree. But because black walnut trees grow so fast, they don't always live for very long. And there was a wattle here on the left that died, and it started to drop big branches onto the track, so we had to cut it down. But as we go past the tree stump there, you can see how it's hollow inside, just like that log. And that tree and the log were hollowed out by termites, white ants. They're not really an ant, so we use the termite name. And there's a termite's nest just here that was partly responsible for hollowing out that tree. And there used to be another termite's nest up in the tree itself. And those termites are very important to the ecology of the rainforest because all of this leaf litter on the ground here and any fallen branches and fallen trees, the termites will very quickly attack those, break them down, and get all the nutrients back into the soil. And the termites themselves those termites don't just eat the dead trees, they will eat the hard dead trees. So what are these trees that you can see around us here? Growing and they're quite tall. And they can be hollow inside. The tree. And the termites make those tunnels because they can't stand sunlight. So the tunnels give them 24-hour-a-day access to the tree that they're eating or to their nest. So just beside us here we have some tree ferns. These ones with the thin dark trunk and the dark leaves. They're called black tree ferns or Rebecca tree ferns. And this one up above us here is called a giant tree fern. So giant tree ferns grow up and down the east coast of Australia and in New Zealand, but they don't get as big as this down south. They need the extra rain and sunlight to pick it up here to get so big. And if you look in the centre of the crown there, you can see that's where the new fronds come out. And the fronds come out all curled up, and then they'll slowly unfurl. But when they're curled up like that, that's called a fiddlehead. That's just a little ant, he won't be able to hurt you. When it's curled up like that, it's called a fiddlehead. And sometimes the local Aboriginal people in this area, they're called the Jabbergai people or the Bama people, they would cut off one of those fiddleheads, they'd burn the hairy fibres off the outside of them, cook them up, and it tastes a little bit like asparagus. So this tree here is probably about 60 or 70 years old, but they have fossil records of these going back 150 to 200 million years. So these trees would have been around at the same time as the dinosaurs. So next time you're having some asparagus, I just think you're getting some of the same flavours that the dinosaurs had millions of years ago. You know, I had an older gentleman on the army not so long ago who didn't like asparagus at all. And his theory was that's why the dinosaurs were extinct. So, who knows? So, you may have noticed a little bit of liquid sunshine around today. It does start to rain heavily. I can roll these covers down, but you do get a much better view with the covers rolled up. So, well, they can give you drips here and there. Look at what we came here to see. Remember, sir, just to keep your arms inside the duck. Yeah. And you'll get wiped out on a tree or there's some quite sharp plants I'll show you later on. Might be able to see some of the fiddleheads curled up on these black tree ferns here beside us. The fiddleheads on those ones are actually quite poisonous, so you should never try anything from the rainforest unless you're absolutely sure you know what you're eating. So there are almost 1,000 different types of trees in the forest around here, and about 20,000 different types of plants altogether. They all have a different niche that they fill and different ways that they can meet the light and the nutrients that they need. Like I said, some trees can grow very quickly, others have large green leaves so they grow well on the forest floor. Some plants like on the lines here, they'll fly right up to the top of the trees, chasing after sunlight, and they don't waste their energy on a heavy truck of their own, they just shoot up the plants to get up there. And then there are plants like the basket ferns, or the basket fern growing up behind the tree at the back. They'll grow up there around the trunk of the tree with lots of sunlight, and they don't even bother sending roots down to the ground, they'll just stay self-contained in the tree that's on. They're one of the few rainforest plants that are deciduous or semi-deciduous. And you'll see some more of those basket ferns in a minute here, lining up other plants. This stuff here on the left is called a pandanus palm, and that's one of the plants that I spoke about that you shouldn't reach out and grab. If you look carefully at the ends of the leaves there, you'll see there are very sharp spikes up and down both edges. And these plants also get a fruit on them that looks a little bit like a small spiky pineapple. But that fruit is quite poisonous. If you eat it, you'd get very sick. But local people would carefully pick some of those leaves, and then they'd peel the spikes off. The spikes come off in a big long strip quite easily, and then with the rest of the leaf they'd weave a basket. Then they could pick some of the spiky fruit, they'd bash it up with a rock or a stick, put that in the basket that they just made, and then put the whole thing in a running stream for a week or two, and that would wash all the poisons and toxins out. And then they could come along and pick it up out of the stream and eat it just like it was, or they'd cook it up like a starchy bread. And they used to call it the old people's fruit, because young people didn't have the patience to go through all that for a meal. It was washed out and tasteless anyway. Yeah, there must have been quite a few upset stomachs working up the recipe for that as well, I think. So, so most of the food and the fruit from this particular rainforest is fairly poisonous, and so most of it had to be treated in some way before it could be eaten. And some of those treatment processes are very complex, almost advanced chemistry. So no one's really quite sure exactly how they worked out how to do it. So, as we come around the corner here, if you look way up behind the trees in front of us, you'll see some more basket ferns. And those basket ferns are epiphytes, which means they're not like a parasite. They don't hurt the tree that they're on. They just use it as a place to hang on and grow. And where they get all of their nutrients is from any dead leaves or sticks or bird droppings that fall down from above. They get caught up in that basket shape. That starts to build up and compost, and that releases nutrients that way. So that composting process also gives off a lot of heat. So you'll often find lizards, snakes, goannas, and sometimes even tree kangaroos sitting up there trying to keep warm. So, so how many of you knew that kangaroos could climb trees? Nobody? Yeah, most of them can't, of course. Most of them can't, of course. The macropods, they're the kangaroos and wallabies that you're probably familiar with. They have to hop along on their hind legs. They can't move their back legs separately. It's pretty hard to climb a tree with that limitation. But there are 2 species of kangaroo from Australia and 12 from Papua New Guinea that have evolved back into the trees, have regained that ability to move their back legs separately, and that allows them to climb. They are found in this area, but they are quite rare. So if you do want to see one, we have a young male tree kangaroo in our wildlife park here. Just have a look for him if you're going through there. He's got a really big long tail. So now that I've told you all that, it's not quite true. The other kangaroos and wallabies can move their back legs separately, but not on land. On land they have to hop along. If you put them in water, they'll dog paddle like most other quadrupeds. So they're a bit unusual in that way. So we have some more epiphytes here. This one here is called an elkhorn fern. And you can see how the leaves resemble the antlers of an elk. There are lots of those in the forest here. Most of them are up high in the trees, so have a look as we go through and you should see a lot of those. This one here is a staghorn fern, and these are far less common than the elkhorns. That's the only one I know of on the property, is that one there. And both of these grow very slowly, so the staghorn here is probably 20 or 30 years old. The elkhorn would be 30, 40, even 50 years old. And you can see one of the main differences between these two. The elkhorn's made up of lots of smaller plants, whereas the staghorn is just one big plant. So, so just when I start the duck here is usually when all the little kids slide off the seat and onto the floor. On a good day, a few adults do as well. So, so just be ready. Oh, that wasn't too bad. That's a bit disappointing, actually. So just up here on the right is just on the right there's a tall tree there. If you have a look at the tree trunk at about eye level there, you can see there's an orchid growing on the trunk. That one there is a king orchid. And king orchids get quite spectacular sprays of tiny little white and yellow flowers that come out. But the problem with the king orchids is that they only flower for about 1 week every 2 or 3 years. So they're going to be pretty lucky if you want to catch one of those in bloom. And there's another tall tree up here on the right. If you jump behind that one, you can see there's another elkhorn up there. That's typically where we find the elkhorns, up there in the fork of the tree or on the bigger branches. And up ahead here and on the right, another epiphyte. This one up here is a bird's nest, a crow's nest fern. The leaves on those can get up to 2 metres long. And just like a lot of the other ferns, they often grow right around the trunk of a tree like that. And because those ferns go around the trunk, that helps found during the dry season. All it needs is a little bit of low cloud to hold with the hilltops, and that will create water running down the trunk of the tree. And because those ferns go around the trunk, they collect the water, and then there's enough moisture to keep it warm and keep the rain as well. Okay, so Kevin here in the front row has kindly offered to help me out with the driving of the army duck. We do have a bit of a problem with this army duck, Kevin. our reversing beaker's broken. So you know what a truck sounds like when it goes backwards? Hold that.
那你开车啊？
Hold that.
拿这个。
拿着。
Yeah.
拿着来了。
Go beep, beep, beep.
哦。
Okay, like a truck going
倒车
backwards.
是
Okay.
什么声音？
倒车
Yeah,
是
go
喊
on,
哔
Kevin.
哔。
All right.
Winston, you want to do it?
Your turn. What's your name? Sophia. Okay, Sophia, off you go.
倒车请。
Beep. That's it. You got it. Keep going, Sophia. A little bit more.
We're reversing.
Yeah, a little bit more. Nearly there, Sophia.
然后听到嘣。
Good job. Big hand for Sophia for helping us out. Thank you, Sophia. You're the best beeper I've had all day. Okay, so just beside us here is one of the iconic plants of the far north, and it's called the North Queensland fan palm. And you can see where the name comes from, those really big fan-shaped leaves. So the big surface area of those leaves helps to catch any sunlight, even in the darkest rainforest. These ones here have a nice bright spot, so it's not such a problem for them. And those big leaves also shade underneath the plant quite well, so it makes it hard for other competing plants to come up underneath it. So these are fairly uncommon, almost rare, and that's mainly because they grow so slowly. This one here is probably about 40 years old or more and still hasn't reached maturity yet. It's never put out any seeds. And so the big ones are probably about 200 years old. They're not like a normal tree. They don't have growth rings, so we have no way to tell for sure exactly how old they are. We can only estimate from the size and from the growth rates.
就会摔
So
倒
if。you have a look where the fronds come into the main trunk there, you can see there's a brown matted material. It looks a little bit like
地上
hessian.
跑得快。
When local people would want to light a fire, they'd often twirl a stick on a piece of bark or slide a stick up and down a groove in a piece
那
of
那
bark.
是不是到那
They'd
个
do
水
that to generate heat, but then they'd put some of that brown stuff on there to get the first flames going. It's quite good tinder when
然后
it's
最后
dry.
突然加速了？
And like most palms, the heart of these is edible, but unfortunately the only way to get at the heart of the palm is to cut it out, and that kills the plant. So all of these palms are now protected. So just in front of us here, running across in front of the army duck, there's a little creek called Streets Creek. And it was named after the Streets family, and the Streets family started the Rainforest Station property back in the 1890s as a coffee plantation. It was quite successful. The coffee won awards in London for the quality, but after a few years there was a big drought in this area that killed a lot of the coffee trees. A few years later a cyclone came through and killed a lot of the trees again. That coffee plantation survived both of those events, but it eventually closed in the 1920s because the price of labour to pick the coffee berries got too high. But if you go back to Streets Creek here and look through that gap in the trees across the creek, you can see two vines over there. And you can follow those two vines right up, and right up to the top of that tree at the back. One of those vines starts down around the corner here on the left. I'll talk a bit more about those plants shortly, but this is a good place to have a look at a nice big one as we go past. There are also two more giant tree ferns here as well, in case you haven't already noticed those.
走吧，走吧。
Okay, so as you can see, we've come to a bit of a fork in the road here. I can take the left-hand track, head up and around the pond or the dam and go back to the station that way.
这边
Or we
走。
can drive down into the creek, try and get out the other side and head back that way. I usually have a vote to see which way everyone wants to go, so all those who'd like to go to the left, put your hands up please.
妈的水。
谁呀？
All those who want to go to the right, hands up please. Good, that's 100% record so far, I'm happy with that. Now I should probably tell you that this thing weighs about 6 tons. So does anyone want to change their mind? No? You're all very brave, that's good. So so who can tell me what this is called?
糖给我。
No, it's called mine. But don't worry, if anything should happen, I'll be fine, okay? Now if it does go badly wrong for us, your life jackets are way up the back there in those two boxes. But I wouldn't worry too much. We haven't lost anybody for weeks now. So so Sophia wants to know how deep the water is. It's above my head, Sophia. After that, it doesn't really matter. No, it's about 3 or 4 metres deep in the deepest part. So so just where I stop down here, if you look way up high in the trees to the right at the back there, you'll see there's another basket fern, and it's a really big one. It's one of the biggest in the area. And one of the biggest you'll likely to see. So they don't get much bigger than that one up there because you can imagine the weight of it during the wet season. When it gets fully full off, it gets so heavy that the branches will break or the tree might fall down, or it'll just start falling apart in big pieces. And we also have another tree air plant here, and that's called our camera tree. So they say you should never smile at a crocodile, but we don't follow that rule here at Rainforest Station. So just keep your eyes on the crocodile's head and make sure your head's not behind one of the steel bars there. You ready? 1, 2, 3, whiskey. Whiskey's much better than cheese, I've found. So when I drop you off, it'll be back at platform 2 where we started. And as you're heading back through the gift shop or tropical treats, the little fruit bar there, your photo should be on display in the gift shop or tropical treats again, which is get front. So it is still a little bit bumpy further up the creek. So hold on for a bit longer. Okay, so thanks again to Sophia. She just turned the propeller on, so we're now officially a boat. So you can call me Captain Chris from now on. And this is my first mate, Sophia, up here. So if anybody is wondering if there are any crocodiles in the water, the quickest way to find out is to just pop your hand over the edge into the water, shake it about for a minute, and we can go fishing. Nobody wants to know that, that's it. Oh, it's the first mate's job to check for crocodiles, so she's not doing it. Okay. I'll tell you, there are no crocodiles in here. The large saltwater or estuarine crocodiles, they get up to about 5-6 metres long. So I'm kind of glad they're not in here because they could quite easily jump up and take them down the army duck. But they won't climb up all the little Then it was turned into a citrus orchard where they grew mostly Valencia oranges. And in the 1970s, the current owners bought this property and they added tropical fruit trees to the orchard from all over the world. 40 or 50 different varieties of exotic fruits were grown here. A few years after that, they started the Army Duck Tours, and the rest of the business has slowly grown with the So this tree in front of us here, hanging out over the water, that one's called a Melaleuca tree. It's also known as a paperbark tree. You can see how the bark on the trunk there is coming off in layers, just like paper. You can get a piece of that, peel it apart, layer by layer, down to tissue paper thickness. But if you have a few layers of that together, it's actually quite waterproof. So local people would sometimes peel a section of the bark off the trunk of that tree, and then they use that to make a bowl to carry water. Occasionally they need to make canoes from it. So it's not really what you'd expect from paperbark. As we go back through the gap there, if you have a look to the right of that gap, you can see there's a little island there. And if you look carefully in amongst all the trees in that island, you'll be able to see there's a few places where there's balls of leaves all stuck together. Some of those balls of leaves are bigger than a basketball. And the balls of leaves are nests. They're the nests of green ants, or weaver ants. So green ants are about 10 or 12 millimetres long. And to make those nests, they climb out all over the leaves in their hundreds, and they climb all over each other. They join their legs together and form a chain, and they pull all the leaves together. And basically they make themselves a little multi-storey apartment. And inside of those nests, there'll be layers of eggs and ants at different stages of development. They're a mostly vegetarian ant, but if you disturb one of those nests or go too closely under the tree, they'll often drop out of the tree on top of you. And you can just flip them off. But if you happen to squash one, it'll then send out a scent or a smell, and then all the rest of the green ants will start biting you at once. But the good news is, you can bite them back. They're actually edible. They're quite rich in vitamin C, and they have a very strong sour lemon taste. And there's more good news for you guys. There's plenty of those green ants back at platform 2, so if anyone wants to try one when we get back there, I'm sure I can find a couple for you. Any takers?